What is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Just want to get a quick video up for you guys talking about the new defensive line coach for the New York Giants, Andre Patterson. In addition to that, the New York Giants hired an assistant offensive line coach, Tony Sperano Jr. Not going to talk too much about him in this video. There's not much to talk about. Tried to do some research. He's been in the league for a bit. He's been mainly an assistant offensive line coach, which is the position he will have with the New York Giants. It's a lateral move. If you remember, his father was the head coach for the Miami Dolphins back in the day. I think he was the first guy to bring the Wildcat to the NFL, if I'm not mistaken. But in this video, we're going to talk about the new defensive line coach for the New York Giants, who, of course, will be replacing Coach Chaos, a guy that a lot of Giants fans were excited about when we brought him in from Penn State. Well, Patterson has a lot of good things that come along with him. He's been with the Vikings for a long time. We're going to go over all the resume, and was actually an assistant head coach for the Minnesota Vikings as recently as this year. He had really strong ties to Mike Zimmer. They coached together in college, and they were best of friends. He brought him along with the Minnesota Vikings when Zimmer lost his job this year. The Vikings did talk about potentially retaining him, but he decided to leave Minnesota to join the New York Giants and to try to help out this defensive line. When I think about the Minnesota Vikings, I think about the defensive line, at least in recent years. Even before he got there, you think about Jared Allen, one of the better pass rushers in football. But you look at what he's been able to do with some of the players on that team since he's been there. Danielle Hunter was a former third-round pick. I think he's a 2 or 3-time Pro Bowler, has been one of the better pass rushers in the NFL during his tenure there as a defensive line coach. Linval Joseph, we all remember him as New York Giants fans, went over to Minnesota, made 2 Pro Bowls in 2016 and 2017. Everson Griffin, we'll get into just how strong of a bond he has had with the defensive line coach that now we will be bringing in Patterson. But Patterson was a major reason why Everson Griffin decided to come back and play with the Minnesota Vikings. Sheldon Richardson, we'll get into some of the things that he said as well. But everything you hear about, fans and former players from the Minnesota Vikings is they absolutely love him. And we know the New York Giants need as much help as they possibly could get in terms of getting after the quarterback. Last year, I think we ranked 22nd in sacks. The Minnesota Vikings ranked second. And they've been top 5, I think, 4 or 5 out of the 6 or 7 years he's been coaching with the Minnesota Vikings football team. So they've had sustained success, and Patterson has been credited with a lot of it. But let's jump into all of it. This coming out from Adam Schefter. Former Vikings assistant head coach and co-defensive coordinator Andre Patterson is being hired as the defensive line coach for the New York Giants, per source. So a lot of people may look at that, myself included, when I initially read it, and may say, wow, he's taking a demotion to join the New York Giants. But with the head coaching change, I would think he was not going to probably retain the same role that he had. Maybe he was going to go back to be a defensive line coach with the Vikings, because there was word that they wanted to keep him. But maybe he viewed the New York Giants as a better situation. Maybe he felt more comfortable with the coaches they had over there. Regardless, I'm happy that he's aboard with the New York Giants. This is his resume. Was a defensive line coach with the New England Patriots. Did have some other stops as well in college. I just pulled up his NFL resume for the most part. Defensive line coach with the Patriots in 97. Vikings was a defensive line coach from 88 to 99. Then went to the Cowboys for 3 years before going to the Browns for the same job for 2 more years. Then went to the Broncos for 2 years as a defensive line coach. Then went back to high school for 1 year as an offensive line coach before going to UNLV to be an assistant head coach and defensive line coach for 2 years before going to UTEP. Having a similar role, then making his way back to the NFL with the Minnesota Vikings for a second time from 2014 to 2019 was the defensive line coach before becoming a co-defensive coordinator and defensive line coach in 2020. Then this past year got promoted to be the assistant head coach, co-defensive coordinator, and the defensive line coach. So he kept getting more and more responsibility. A lot of Vikings fans, if you go back and read some of the things that they had to say, actually were in favor of him potentially becoming the head coach over there. So he's very respected from within that fan base. So let's get into some of the things he's been able to accomplish. He was able to pull this off of actually Reddit in the Minnesota Vikings community. Patterson joined the Vikings in 2014 when Mike Zimmer became the head coach. Since then, the Vikings have ranked as follows in number of sacks, tackles for losses, and rushing yards per attempt per season. Pro Football Reference also includes advanced stats from 2018 onward, so they don't have the advanced stats before that. 2014, they had 41 sacks, which ranked 9th. They had 69 tackles for loss, which only ranked 24th, and 4.3 yards attempt, which ranked 24th. 2015, they were 7th in sacks, 2016, they were 5th in sacks. 2017, they were 17th in sacks. And then in 2018, you'll notice they were 3rd, 5th. 2020, they took a big step back at 28th, but they did have some injuries to that defensive line. This past year, they were 2nd. So each out of the 3 out of the last 4 years, the Minnesota Vikings ranked 5th or better in 3 out of those 4 years, ranking as highly as 2nd this past year with Patterson as the defensive line coach. Let's dive a little bit further into him. Before the injury bug hit Minnesota, Patterson's defensive front was leading the league in sacks at one point last season. They finished 3rd in average sacks per game behind the Pittsburgh Steelers and San Francisco 49ers. So at the very least, Patterson should be a solid addition to a Giants team that struggled all season generating pressure up front. And he's got some talent on that defensive line, right? Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams. We'll see if we had any other players in the draft, but we'll see if he's able to get the most out of both of those players this upcoming season, but I'm excited that he's aboard. This is Sheldon Richardson talking about him in terms of being a coach. And when he was asked about why he decided to come back to the Minnesota Vikings. Production and results, said Richardson, when asked why he appreciated Patterson. Told me to trust the process, and I did. He got me paid last time. Came back to help the team out, further my progress. Thought I did good last year, but not good enough, I guess, when asked about why he decided to come back with the Minnesota Vikings. So these are just some of his former players talking about him. This is another former player talking about him. Most coaches try to tell you use loops, flip your hips, try to use the space to your advantage, to try to get wide or to make your offensive lineman come out and get you. Defensive tackle Tom Johnson said. He actually teaches the exact opposite of what you've been told to do a lot, which in film, if you watch us do it, it looks a lot quicker. You eliminate those extra steps. He tells you to go attack the man where you want to be at instead of trying to go around him. So Tom Johnson just talking about some of his, different methods as opposed to other coaches he's had in the past. Everyone in the room is always fighting. Everyone gets critiqued. Everyone has something to work on every day that we come out here, Weatherly said of another former player of his. The fact that he holds everyone to that standard really makes you want to play for the guys to your right and to your left when you step out there. Everson Griffin return is evidence of Andre Patterson's influence. This was an article written by the Minnesota Vikings, and then they went into further detail. It was like having my binky back, Patterson said when talking about getting Everson Griffin back. Very comfortable with him, and he's very comfortable with me. It's just amazing the recall he had with the drills that we do and how he can do them full speed and execute them correctly after being a year away. I guess you can do that when you've been doing the same thing for 7 years. Griffin maintains a residence in Minnesota, and Patterson is elated to see him come home. The Sack Daddy is not only his binky, but his Picasso. A work of art Patterson took years to perfect. Griffin was an unrefined talent when he was drafted in the 4th round out of USC in 2010, and Patterson turned him into a superstar after he was hired by the Vikings in 2014. For Patterson to see Griffin in silver and blue last year was like watching his masterpiece get smeared. So I just want to bring up a couple of things talking about the success he's had in the past. Obviously, I don't know a ton about him, but when you go on Twitter and you read some of the things that Minnesota Vikings fans have said, they are very upset that they've lost him to the New York Giants, and I'm very excited. It sounds like the New York Giants are building a good staff. Of course, I'm not going to go overboard, but I do like a lot of the coaches they brought in, and Patterson matches that pattern. We'll see how it reflects on the field next year. Do I expect the New York Giants to go out there and win the division? No. I'm going to go in with realistic expectations, but I do like the direction of this coaching staff. And Patterson seems like a guy that players are going to want to play hard for, and he seems like he can add a lot to the table for this defensive line going into 2022. I'm excited about the hire. As always, if you liked what you watched, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.